Hey, what's up, everybody? Video 44 coming at you with another video. All right, so rapid fire basketball talk. If I can come up with anything, I will. Talked about the Lakers plenty. Figured I'd just wrap it off about a couple teams that I'm thinking about and see what comes of it. But hope everybody's enjoying their day. First of all, thank you all for watching me. It's continued support that I have from all of you guys means the world to me. Everybody liking my videos and stuff like that. So I first want to say thank you, because I don't do that very often, and I know we're going into a new season, and I'm gonna give you my best regardless of what the situation is, whether we're talking about the Lakers or talking about the rest of the league to any capacity. So yeah, that's the first thing I want to say. I did some watching of highlights of a guy by the name of Rob Dillingham of the Minnesota Timberwolves last night at random, and I was bored. I was just checking out some players that I think could potentially have some fantasy basketball value, altering my teams a little bit, adding, subtracting, stuff like that, and doing homework on him tells he has skills on the offensive end that I think are going to translate immediately. His ball handling, the fact that he's a small player that plays well in small situations, Trae Youngish type stuff, Jamal Crawford type stuff he's got going on. He don't have to learn how to refine some of those skills in order to be a pro. Those skills are already professional, in my opinion. He utilizes being a small person very well. He's the kind of guy that will dance on your big man and shoot a teardrop over him and stuff like that, and awkward side hook shots, and not hook shots, but like side situations that allow you to shoot the ball from angles that protect the ball itself. He's going to be a good small player in this league right away, and I see an opportunity for him to get some real minutes with the Minnesota Timberwolves, because their point guard position could afford an upgrade like that. It really could afford an upgrade like that, given the fact they have Mike Conley, who's starting to get a little older now. Mike Conley can scoot over, you know what I mean? He may start, but he can scoot over some of the minutes, or they can move on from Mike Conley while he still has value. If Dillingham comes in and is able to take that starting spot, Dillingham can make assists happen for big men. He can pass out of dribble situations, pass out of good triple threat situations, draw enough defensive contact to ultimately create space for others. And he passes well out of double teams from what I saw. I think Minnesota should be very excited about this piece, man. I really do. I think they should be very excited about Dillingham. I think he could very easily end up being your starting point guard by the end of the year and be a part of real playoff situations if he stays healthy and takes well to being a professional. And the future is bright. I don't think it was a mistake trading for him. I think it was a mistake for the San Antonio Spurs trading him away, though. I'll tell you that. I don't think they would know what the hell they were doing. I really don't. Especially since Stephon Castle can play about 3 positions. And they're legitimately in need of someone who can break down defenses like Rob Dillingham. The fact that he fell in their lap and then they trade him away, I think it's something that's going to haunt the Spurs for a very long time. I really believe that. He should not have been made available that day. No. Him and Wemby and Stephon would have been fantastic going forward. Devin Vassell and all that, he would have fit right in. I don't remember exactly what they did in getting him, getting him gone. I don't know what they traded away. I don't think it was a whole lot. Maybe a first-round pick from like many years down the road from Minnesota or something like that. I don't know, man. But that to me was a stupid trade. That was a stupid trade. And so we'll see the Minnesota Timberwolves benefit from that a great deal. I think that at the end of the day, what you just want Rob Dillingham to be your sixth man out the gate. If you're the Minnesota Timberwolves, you're a winning situation. You got Anthony Edwards. You got the Trent Tower effect going on with, of course, Carl. Hopefully he'll have a healthy season. With Rudy Gobert. Terrence Shannon, the other draftee they got, of whom I'm very excited about as well. McDaniels, Jaden McDaniels, who I think is going to be a fantastic defender for years to come. Miller, who they drafted last year, who's also a very strong forward, who's going to do a lot of good things at the combo forward positions as they work him into the equation. I just love what the Minnesota Timberwolves have this year, way more than I did last year, way more. Just by adding those 2 rookies and what it is I know they can do, man. It's going to be fun for that team. And so I think everybody who's paying attention to the Minnesota Timberwolves, if you have championship aspirations, I would feel as confident to say that this is probably the most talented Minnesota Timberwolves team you've ever had. I think so. I think it's probably the most talented team y'all had, man. And I remember some pretty good Minnesota teams, Latrell Sprewell, I believe Anthony Peeler, Kevin Garnett. Y'all had some eras where, you had some pretty good talent. It wasn't always great because you had a huge setback with the Joe Smith situation. And then furthermore, trading Kevin Garnett to the Celtics for Al Jefferson, who really didn't do nothing for Minnesota, nothing that changed life for them. So they kind of just have been a team that's made some bad decisions in the draft. Obviously, it's historically understood that they picked up 2 point guards and left Steph Curry on the draft board in doing so that year, which was very stupid that day. When you look back on that, make no mistake about it, Steph Curry should have gone number 6 to the Knicks. But the fact that they didn't take him or were not able to take him, I think it was either they had the pick behind him or before that. Whatever the case may be, people were hoping he was going to the Knicks. Ended up going to, of course, the Warriors. But Minnesota had, I think it was like the 3rd and the 5th pick or something like that. And they ended up taking like Ricky Rubio and Johnny Flynn. Now, people were excited about Ricky Rubio. Pretty excited about Rubio. But Johnny Flynn, I believe, is who they took, the other point guard, leaving Steph Curry on the board, which was, quite honestly, a franchise-killing decision, considering how long it's been since they were able to finally get to the playoffs about 2 years ago for the first time in many years. So they just had some bad decisions go the wrong way for them. And now I think they're finally in a position, after mortgaging everything for Rudy Gobert, which is still ill-advised when you consider it, but it's worked out quite well. In regards to them trying to win. They're finally in a position to really capture their first NBA championship as a franchise. And I'm not going to say they're the favorites in my eyes to win it, but I really do like them a lot more than I did last year. A lot more. I think Dillingham could be that much of a difference maker. Someone who could break down off and create more space for a guy like Anthony Edwards, of whom was really the only go-to one-on-one option that Minnesota has had, and they were still able to be much of a threat to the Western Conference with that being the case. It wasn't really nobody else you can just get a ball and say, go get a bucket. Now, that changes. You put Dillingham down there, and he going to get buckets repeatedly off of the bounce. So that leaves room for Anthony Edwards to potentially have so much more space defensively, offensively rather, coming up against him. It gives him a little bit of a cushion to heal from injuries. If for some reason he rolls an ankle or something like that, he don't have to rush back because they have a real source of go-to offense with Dillingham. So if Dillingham turns into what I think he can be, he might be just what the Minnesota Timberwolves need to get out of the Western Conference this year. I don't know that they lose the series against Dallas if they have the unit that they now have, if those players are high-impact rookies, like I believe they're set up to be. Dillingham is set up to be a high-impact rookie on the offensive end, and Terrence Shannon is a guy who's been in college for a while, who also would have been likely a lottery pick if he didn't have the legal situation, which fell in his direction, went in his favor, and so now he's free of his legal concerns and gets to start his career fresh. I don't know, man. I don't know. There's some teams like Oklahoma City that need to obviously be considered in the Western Conference. Memphis, I think, is a team that you have to take seriously. Dallas, of course, a lot of people want to take seriously, but I don't think it's going to be returning. But they should be taken very seriously. And I'm sure there's a few others. New Orleans is a much improved basketball team. So the West is tight. Don't get it twisted. I'm not just saying that any one team is going to just rush to the top of it. But for me, looking at what Minnesota has going on right now, if they can turn those players into what I think they should be able to be out the gate, those rookies, if they can really get them going, that should be enough to make them as good as they can be, man. Should make them as good as they need to be to get out of the Western Conference, I believe. I really believe that. But I do have to say that it's going to be difficult afterwards, once Rudy Gobert starts to decline, to have that same dynamic in place going forward. They're going to need him to stay healthy, continue to be that cog defensively that helps everybody. And that's a very important thing. If anything happens to Rudy Gobert, it all goes to crap, to be honest with you, because they're not particularly great defensively without him. He covers a lot of their mistakes defensively, and he's really the heart and soul of what makes them a contender, in my opinion. You remove that piece and they can't be a contender. Not if they're going to have just Naz Reid and what's the gentleman's name? Of course, Karl Anthony Towns is the front court defensive help. You can't get out. You can't do nothing with that. That's a turnstile situation. But with Rudy Gobert down there, he creates so many problems defensively. It's such a big target for which to have to get around on the offensive end for these guys going against them, that ultimately I just feel like they're such a serious contender so long as that piece is in place. Along with, of course, Anthony Edwards, the star. And Karl Anthony Towns provides a great deal of help with his ability to stretch the floor and rebound the ball. It's such a fantastic height. So, Karl's conditioning is important. I think the luster surrounding him, so to speak, in regards to how much his upside is, or what his ceiling is, rather, it's kind of been dropped a great deal since draft day for Karl Towns. I don't think people really look at him as a superstar or anything, but he's still a hell of a piece to have, man. He just has to, I think, kind of settle into kind of letting the torch be officially passed to Anthony Edwards. I think Anthony Edwards snatched that torch, but I think it's going to be incumbent upon Karl to concede that. Because there was a game against the Charlotte Hornets last year where Karl Anthony Towns had like 75 points, for which he's more than capable of doing incredible stuff like that. But they ended up losing the game because he ended up trying to do too much, trying to get to 100 or whatever the hell he was trying to do. So it's like, if you're gonna have those selfish, unwise basketball plays, you take away from the ceiling of the basketball team. He's got to be able to work within the confines of what the system needs 100% of the time, and not try to be that guy that can do so much on a given night that he ends up trying to force it like he did that night. Hopefully he learned from that, but that's typical losing mentality type stuff that he was doing in that fourth quarter against the Charlotte Hornets last year. I encourage everybody to go check out them highlights. Had a fantastic first half, but then he kept trying to push it and force the issue, and got cold and kept fighting a couple attempting shots, and it was just like, yo, work this system and you'll win the game. You let Charlotte come all the way back and win the game. It's a bad Charlotte team, mind you. They didn't even have LaMelo on the floor, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, that type of stuff is unacceptable. And if Karl wants to be a part of a winning situation, he has got to learn how to be a winning basketball player in all situations, not just when he's hot, but too when he's having trouble scoring, if that ever happens. So that's really what it is, man. Can Karl shake off the loser stuff? Because they got some winning players on this team now. That's what it really comes down to. Some guys who should likely be able to develop winning habits in a winning situation. But Karl's a carryover from the losing. And that can potentially be an anchor in the wrong way against your winning. So that's something that often comes to mind for me when I think about players that are carryovers. You start bringing in all this good talent, all these guys that can really play, and then you find yourself in a situation where now you got these guys that are on the team that are used to losing, doing stuff that they did when they were losing. It's like, nah, get them guys into a position to either fall in line with what it takes to win. They have to be coached up to winning habits, or you got to move them. Because they really will hold you back. And so I look at Karl Towns as the exact copy and paste of that problem. And we'll see. I don't think it's necessary you move him. I think the dynamic of the Twin Tower, especially with one of them being fantastic shooting the ball in Karl Towns, makes it so damn difficult to make sense of moving on from him. But games like the Charlotte game epitomizes what he ultimately could be worth in the market when he's playing like that, and ultimately how much he can be a deterrent just the same when he's playing like that. It's like, damn it, I could probably get 2 picks, 3 picks for a guy that's capable of doing what Carl can do. But can I win the game? You know what I'm saying? And so if the answer is no, maybe moving him ultimately is better for the future of the franchise, who has mortgaged so much for Rudy Gobert. So that's something that I think Minnesota will have to address. Is what is Karl Anthony Towns worth to them versus what could he be worth on the market? And can they win with him? Can they win with him? So that's going to be it. That's what it's about. I don't doubt I can win with Anthony Edwards at all. I think he's going to be an amazing player going forward. And what you need is not having the wrong players around him, keeping him from being able to reach his ceiling as a winner. That's really what I think. Because you put the right players around him, and he's going to be in the Western Conference Finals every year. He's that kind of guy, man. So, there's no doubt about that in my mind at all. And now that they got Dillingham in place, I think he's exactly the type of piece that can grow with him and make that one of the best backcourts of the future, for sure. That could definitely be one of the best backcourts, offensively anyway. So, yeah, interested in the Minnesota Timberwolves. Another team that we've already mentioned, so I'll slide over to them, is the Charlotte Hornets. And I think the reason why the Charlotte Hornets are so intriguing to me is because when I look on most of my fantasy teams, I realize most of my fantasy teams have at least one Charlotte Hornet on it. Don't look now, but they have about 4 legitimate fantasy relevant basketball players on their team. And usually when you go into the season, whether it's basketball or football, either way, with 4 players that you can legitimately harbor on your team, your fantasy teams, that team is going to start winning games. That's a surefire indicator to me that wins will follow, because most teams don't have that. And so it's the same thing I said about the Sacramento Kings 2 years ago. You can start to see signs of a team turning the corner, or a franchise turning the corner, once they start getting relevant basketball players on the squad that can produce. And, it's a lot of things that come together to make a team actually a winning basketball club. But officially, in my opinion, the Charlotte Hornets have talent that they can be very excited about. And those 4 names are Mark Williams, Miles Bridges, LaMelo Ball, and Brandon Miller. 4 guys that I could legitimately say I have no problem rostering. Now, Mark Williams is a guy who's going to have to prove himself health-wise. But they did pass on opportunities to take a center like Donovan Clingan so that they could use Mark Williams. So I'd imagine he's going to get those minutes. They're still extremely excited about him. Tijon Salone could also become a fantasy relevant basketball player, but I think he's 2 years away from being 2 years away. But 4 years from now, he's going to be a hell of a player. Maybe even an all-star hopeful. So I don't doubt that they have even more talent than that for which I just described. But those 4 are legitimate impact players. You could trade them anywhere in the league and they're going to be starters. And that's not something you can say about the Charlotte Hornets at any given time in the past. They just ain't had that. So for me, this is one of the more exciting years of the Charlotte Hornets since returning to Charlotte. So long as they can get some good health out of these guys. Brandon Miller is the truth. It's an absolute monster. He's going to shoot the ball. He's going to dunk on people. He can play some defense. He has a lethal killer mentality, someone you could likely get the ball to down the stretch of a game and get a win. He is a real player. And if he stays healthy throughout the course of his career without having any real setbacks, I don't doubt he'll make a couple of all-star teams in his career. No doubt. So that's one piece. And you look at LaMelo Ball, who's already proven as a star-level player, but the health, every year you can count on him missing about 40 games with an ankle or something like that. That's getting a bit annoying, to be honest with you. But you still believe in him. He's just going to have to find a way to stay on the basketball floor. He got to work on his conditioning in a way that allows for him to play an 82-game schedule. And if he can't develop into that, they're probably going to have to move him, dude. That's what it really comes down to. They're probably going to have to move him. And it's an interesting situation because LaMelo is a star outside of basketball. You know what I mean? He's got star power, so to speak, as a ball brother, as the youngest, the one that ultimately everybody knows is the truth. You know, with Lonzo also being fantastic, but ultimately not being able to stay healthy himself in a much more serious way. And LiAngelo not really being able to get his game going in the NBA. But, you know, LaMelo has been a star since he was 12 years old. So it's never going to be a situation, in my humble opinion, where he's not going to sell basketball jerseys or at least be able to sell some shoes or something like that. He's got the it factor. Even if he weren't a basketball player, I'm pretty sure he'd be a celebrity somehow. He's one of those. So with that being in mind, I can totally see him moving on to a big market someday. Lakers, Clippers, Miami, New York, Brooklyn. He belongs in one of those places eventually. But the problem is he has such a fantastic, well, it's not a fantastic contract if he can't play up to it, but he has such an outstanding contract at $270 or something like that, that it's going to be hard to really get the price tag for him if he can't continue to produce like that on the basketball floor. But a team like the Lakers, when LeBron leaves, I could totally see them wanting to bring in the ball boy. I could totally see them wanting to bring him in, just for star power alone. And I'm sure he'll be happy to be here. So that's a situation where just down the road, I totally see him coming to either the Lakers or the Clippers. If at all possible, he'll probably come home. Or even Golden State post Steph Curry. I could totally see him doing that. They should have drafted him anyway. So I just don't think LaMelo has long for Charlotte. I don't think he'll be there forever unless he just wants to stay in one place for his whole career, which some guys really care about. You know, and given the fact that he spent some time in Lithuania as a young kid, when his dad put him in that situation, I think it prepared him to be in a small market like Charlotte. It was the best move for him, to be honest with you. Still feel that way. And I think you're seeing the benefits of that decision as he handles stardom in a very small market. So kudos to his dad for putting him in that situation. But nevertheless, man, I really do believe that young fella, his time in Charlotte could be coming to an end if he can't prove himself to stay healthy. I really do think they'll probably end up moving him. Not this year. I don't see them doing nothing like that right away. But within the next 3 years, I see him in a different uniform. I do. But for the time being, if they can turn this thing around, that may not never be necessary, you know? And with the type of talent they have, it may be possible. Hey, look at a guy like Miles Bridges, who, when the money's on the line, literally, when it's time for him to get paid, he turns into one of the best two-way players in basketball. Period. I haven't forgotten 3 years ago, before the scandal took place, where he was trying to get money from Michael Jordan and Michael wouldn't pay him. He started the season disgruntled and damn near didn't miss a shot and was locking people up. Simple as that. He's one of the most underrated forwards in basketball. Easily. I will take him over some of these guys that people like a lot. Or I'll take him over some guys that maybe you consider a little ahead of him, like Tobias Harris. I'd much rather have Miles Bridges. You see what I'm saying? Problem with Miles Bridges is a maturity factor. Before the scandal, he was doing a lot of stuff, throwing up all types of hoods or whatever. He's, you know, being in the, you know, the rap scene, talking about violence and stuff like that. That just does not behoove him as a basketball player, trying to make an opportunity for himself. You can see he was an easy target for some of the stuff that ultimately came about. And so hopefully he's grown up a great deal from that. He's stuck with the Charlotte Hornets the whole time. They've stuck with him. Situations where I thought he could probably find himself in a better situation. He didn't leave. He's one of those guys that seems like he wants to be in one team his whole career. And I would not be surprised if he is of the level of All-Star this year. Now, whether or not he makes the All-Star team ever in his career, I have real doubts based on politics that he'll never actually get that type of love. But will he play good enough to do it? I think if he's healthy, no question about it. No question about it. I have a lot more faith in his game than most people do. That's what I will say. I have a lot more faith in his ability on the basketball floor than most of the people who I've heard comment on him actually have. And he's so much better than people give him credit for. And so that's what I have to say, man. I trust him defensively, and so long as he's healthy, and offensively, he's proven he can really do pretty much anything. Pretty much anything. And he's also one of the most prolific athletes in basketball. One of the most effortless jumpers the game has ever seen. Easily. He's up there with Zach LaVine, quite honestly. maybe even more athletic in some strange way. So that's what I think of Miles Bridges. I just think he's probably one of the more underrated players in basketball. A lot of that has to do with people infusing the off-the-court issues with what they think he can do on the court, coupled with the fact that nobody watches him in Charlotte. And the team's been losing the whole time. But he is one of the best two-way basketball players, complete two-way basketball players with size in the game, in my humble opinion. And when you slap a Brandon Miller next to him, don't be surprised if both of them go for 38 to 40-point games at the same time, stuff like that. It's very possible with LaMelo Ball getting a triple-double with 28 points, 15 rebounds, 15 assists. Like, they have such prolific talent in those three players alone, man. Prolific talent. And they just have to find a way to first believe in that and then let it turn into victories. Because you take those same three players and put them in a real market, no disrespect, but a big market with a big name team, and you'll see that production turn into winning. I think a lot of it has to do with psychological stuff going on as it pertains to just being a Charlotte Hornet and expecting to lose. I really do believe that. I think sometimes teams have a hard time shaking that off. Even if you get great talent, it's like they expect to lose so they don't find ways to win. You know what I mean? I really think that. And I think Charlotte's probably one of the main places where that's a problem. And it has been the whole time. So, for me, I'm just looking to see if they can change that culture with Brandon Miller now being in place, Tejan Salone now being in place. Can those two players come in to their own as tip-top forwards that will accompany the big body size of a LaMelo Ball, a tall guard, and Miles Bridges, also a fantastic size small forward? Can they all come together within the next 3 years to play their best ball at once? And if so, they're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to be one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, in fact, if all those guys reach their ceiling. I don't even think that's a stretch. I think that's kind of a foregone conclusion. So, yeah, man, I'm getting ahead of the game. I'm not quite certain if they can be like the Sacramento Kings from 2 years ago this year, but that's kind of how this is lining up. That's kind of how this is lining up, man. But they got to find a way to get some culture going for themselves. Just a certain culture. Like Sacramento was able to implement the beam, and that was an incentive-based symbol, I guess you could say. And otherwise, if we get a win, we get to do this. We celebrate each win like it's a playoff win. And they willed themselves all the way to the playoffs that year. And willed their way to the Western Conference Finals last year. Western Conference play-in tournament last year. And ultimately some injuries got in the way of their upside. But Sacramento was a team that, showed that when they changed that culture, put that beam in there, coupled with the talent they had accumulated, they could really be a dangerous team. Charlotte's going to have to find a way to do that same thing. I don't know if they necessarily put a beam in their building, but they got to do something that's going to garner the faith of the players in the uniform, that it's literally okay to win. You know what I mean? Like, it's okay to win. It's okay to win a lot, and it's okay to win a lot in this uniform. And if they figure that out, look out. So that's what I got to say about the Charlotte Hornets. They could break out as a team that could be a play-in tournament team this year. They have the talent to do it. And so, yeah, man, that's something to pay attention to. And since we're talking about the Sacramento Kings, I think I can shift over there. Sacramento has a lot of talent, too. Bringing in DeMar DeRozan, I don't know what type of impact DeMar can actually bring to the team. And that sounds like I'm saying it in a negative way, but I'm really not. I think I'm actually thinking the opposite. I think the ceiling of a DeMar DeRozan Sacramento Kings team, I don't know that it is in Western Conference Finals. The thing about DeMar DeRozan is he plays a certain way. He doesn't really shoot too many threes, although he can hit the three. At this point in his career, it's not like he's a deficient three-point shooter necessarily, but it's just not his game. He's looking to pick you apart from mid-range. Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant stuff. That's what he wants to do. That's what he's mastered in his career. Turnaround fades. Mid-range specialist. Has been for years. And his athleticism is still where it needs to be to compete at a very high level. Even though he's lost probably a step for age, he was still already athletically inclined. You want him to be better defensively. You never expect for him to be too much on the defensive end, but within the system of Sacramento, for which they usually punt the defensive end most years, I'm not as worried about that for them, more so than I'm worried about just how he's going to operate with De'Aaron Fox, who tends to like to operate from those same spots, and Domantas Sabonis, who tends to play with a few steps in from the three-point line. Although they all are capable of hitting the shot, which is something that I think they're going to have to do in order for it to work. But DeMar DeRozan was one of the best players in the league last year, low-key. Most people don't realize that, but he put up some phenomenal numbers last year on a bad Bulls team, and it just kind of got overlooked. He can win, though. He just has to have players on his team that are leading the way, because he's not a leader of winning. He led a Toronto team, but they never actually really did it. They never made a threat out of the situation. And of course, we saw Kawhi Leonard, come in his stead and ultimately win the championship. And we understood. That's just what to expect. But that doesn't mean that DeMar DeRozan can't be a winning cog to a talented team. And when you start talking about super teams, Boston Celtics, teams like maybe the Rockets, whose all their players could eventually, if they come together, be a super team if they all played it as good as you think they can. When you start talking about what a super team looks like in 2024, I don't know that DeMar DeRozan, De'Aaron Fox, and Domantas Sabonis don't come together to make it about as close to a super team as you're going to find in the Western Conference this year. I don't know that they're not. With respect to maybe the Minnesota Timberwolves, of course, we said the Denver Nuggets, who still have their trio. But for me, when you talk about the star power of DeMar DeRozan and what he's capable of doing individually, De'Aaron Fox and how he continues to get better every year, this is probably an all-star year for De'Aaron if he can get the politics to work in his favor. And, of course, Domantas Sabonis, same thing. Probably the most oversnubbed player in the all-star ballot last year. They got a chip on their shoulder. They didn't make the playoffs. They did add a DeMar DeRozan type piece. They did add a high lottery talent in Carter, who I think most people forgot he actually went there. But that's a real high impact defensive perimeter player, rebounder, and attack dog. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I think they upgraded from Davion Mitchell with Carter, and I still think that with the influx of what it is that they have, they could potentially be a dangerous team. Now, I do believe that they could potentially miss Harrison Barnes, who's now in San Antonio. And that could be a loss there. But he was also starting to age, and it wasn't like they were winning too much with him. So, Keegan Murray needs not be forgotten, another cog to a super team, so to speak. You consider what he can do stretching the floor and how much better he can be defensively going forward. I think Sacramento's ceiling is really, really high, man. I think it's really high. Now, I don't know that they're likely to hit that ceiling in a tough Western Conference. Domantas Sabonis is a hell of a strong center who we know can push Anthony Davis around. But is he going to be able to push around all of who he needs to deal with on a night-to-night basis? With the center position getting more girthy this season than it's ever been before, with Clingan and Edey now on the conference. That's a concern for all big men who are holding down the center position basically by themselves. I think it would behoove the Sacramento Kings, if they haven't done this already, to get themselves another center of some sort to help booster their depth in that way so that they can keep Domantas healthy, because he's going to be banging with some big dudes this year, man. Big dudes. So that's something that needs to be understood by all Western Conference teams. When you get an influx of those two players that I just mentioned, Edey and Clingan, you got to understand that's like 300 pounds apiece, basically. Basically, 4 times a year. So that's 8 with the two teams. Coupled with the centers that are already in the Western Conference who ain't go nowhere. And then you consider even more so the fact that the Portland Trailblazers, when Clingan sits down, still have Ayton. So it's like, even though the Portland Trailblazers are a bad team, if you're a team like Sacramento who has a guy like Domantas and not really a real backup for him, you're going to have problems going up against a team like that with so much damn size. You're going to have problems if you have to see them in a playoff situation, and you got to play them 4 times. Like, that could really cap off your ceiling even if you're extremely talented. So that's my concern with the team like the Sacramento Kings. I think they're talented in a lot of ways that can make them really good. The problem is I don't see enough big man depth, and I know the field they're going up against is going to require that they have it. So if I'm them, I'm going after somebody big to help Domantas Sabonis. I don't know who will be available. There are other teams that obviously need a center, but they need to do something there if they're gonna if they're gonna exceed the cap on their ceiling, in my opinion. So that's something to really pay attention to. for every Western Conference team. I just feel like that center position, a lot of teams haven't really invested too much in the center position in the past because it wasn't as necessary. But we are re-entering an era, especially in the West, where if you don't have centers, you can potentially get upset by a team that you're better than who does have them. Because they're going to out-rebound you, they're going to push that center that you have around, get him in foul trouble, and ultimately you're going to be small out there. And small ball, as we say often, doesn't work. So Sacramento's going to have some small ball lineups out there. We know that. You still got Malik Monk, who you also have to consider someone could potentially be stepping into a star level role for himself. Malik Monk, we know, is one of the most talented shot makers in basketball. So if he happens to make an all-star team in his career, it won't shock me. He read up with the Sacramento Kings for 4 years. They're not going to have issues spreading the floor with those two, him and Murray, on the floor at the same time. They still got Kevin Huerter, also can stretch the floor, had an injury year last year. I don't know if he'll ever become the player he was again with Atlanta, but he's still a hell of a threat who can do some combo things as well, not just shoot the three. So I really like the Sacramento Kings talent, man. I think they have a very strong bench. I think that second unit is going to be ferocious with Carter and some of those names already mentioned. When De'Aaron and Sabonis sit down, they still got to deal with Malik Monk, still got to deal with these guys that we've already mentioned. So for me, I'm not too certain that the Sacramento Kings aren't going to be a very good team in the regular season this year. And some of these teams that didn't do enough to get better, that's one of the teams that I think did get better. They got better, man. So you got to deal with them. Even if they're not a contender, they're still going to be eating away at the Western Conference win totals from team to team to team. So with the return of the Memphis Grizzlies, the improvement of the Sacramento Kings, the improvement of some of these other teams like Portland, who aren't going to probably make the playoffs but will play spoiler, the Phoenix Suns, of whom I don't really know how good they can be in the circumstances, but if Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker all play up to their level of talent, obviously they're a contender. The Lakers with LeBron and AD, and I really think we have some nice pieces that can complement those guys more so than what we had last year. So we're going to take away from some of y'all wins in the Western Conference as well. So it's going to be a tight Western Conference so long as health permits. I do think that it's only going to be like 4 games that separates the first team from the last team this year. I think it's going to be a lot of parity in the West, and how teams do against the Eastern Conference and winning the games that they need to win ultimately will probably separate them. Health and winning the games you must win, I think, are going to tell the story there. The Denver Nuggets, you still got to consider them, although I really think they took some major steps back. We've mentioned their problems, but they still have that trio of players that ultimately you have to deal with in Murray, Porter, and of course the best player in basketball, Nikola Jokic. So you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Can Wemby be an MVP candidate this year? I wouldn't rule it out with how many ways he can affect the basketball court. Does that turn the San Antonio Spurs into a team that you got to deal with? Possibly. So I don't really know, man. It's one of those situations where you just have to wonder what the West is going to bring this year. You could have a situation where a team looks great in the first half of the season, loses a couple key pieces, and all of a sudden finds themselves tumbling down the standings in ways that don't really happen too often. I can totally see something like that happening to a team this year. The team that might be in the first seed at the top of the season could find themselves in like the second half of the bottom of the Western Conference in the second half of the season. So, that's kind of my little prediction there for the West. It's going to be very difficult for teams like Golden State, the Clippers, teams that just did not get better, who needed to do some things differently in order to make themselves competitive. Some will say my Lakers. I don't think that's unfair, but I just don't think much of those teams this year. Quite honestly, those are the teams that I think are going to probably slide. If I'm a betting man, it teams like Minnesota, Sacramento, New Orleans is going to be up there. And New Orleans is another team I kind of want to talk about too in this video, because bringing in DeJounte Murray gives them such a different dynamic to what they've had in the past. It allows CJ to now focus only on scoring, and it takes the ball out of CJ's hands in situations where otherwise it should be more diversified offense going on. One of the things I hated about the New Orleans Pelicans is that CJ would have the ball in his hands, dribbling and forcing the last second shot. It's like, man, you need to be playing point guard because you have a bunch of options that can ultimately hit that shot. But because he's so selfish-minded scoring the ball, he really did eat away at some of those circumstances down the stretch of basketball games trying to be the man. It's one of my biggest pet peeves in the NBA is CJ McCollum's game, to be honest with you. I just hate watching him play for that reason. He needs to become more unselfish on a team where you have so many options. You know what I mean? And I think that their coach needs to incorporate the lethal shooting of Hawkins into the rotation. I understand Hawkins was a rookie last year and they had a lot of options. So I give them plenty of passes for not playing their rookie last year. But I do think he's one of those guys like Dillingham who make an immediate impact if they're in the right situation, because what they do don't have to be taught. He's an NBA three-point shooter out the gate and somebody who's going to be lethal if you put him in the right situation. So he's a dangerous piece that's not being utilized, and they need to work him into the equation. And they got to figure out what they want to do with Brandon Ingram as well, because I think the presence of Brandon Ingram, if I'm not certain of what I'm saying, but I believe the presence of Brandon Ingram is potentially holding Trey Murphy back. One of my very favorite basketball players, Trey Murphy, Trigger Murphy III. Going to be one of the best shooters on the planet as he develops. But he's going to have to get the minutes that allow him to be that small forward. And if he doesn't have those minutes, he doesn't necessarily produce himself into becoming that all-star level shooter that I think he's ultimately born to be. He's fallen back down the pecking order a bit more than what you prefer, and some of the injury issues have also taken away from what he can do, improving and showing improvement. So I'm paying attention to the New Orleans Pelicans because I think DeJounte Murray takes the ball out of selfish players' hands. Brandon Ingram is not selfish in my opinion. He's definitely somebody we know can pass the rock if he wants to, but he's also somebody who plays a lot of one-on-one basketball, ground and pound, look for his own shot, continue to keep the offense stagnant as it pertains to other players. DeJounte should be the end-all, be-all to that nonsense. He should make it so that there's no reason anymore for either one of those players to control the offense. You put the ball in DeJounte's hands, and if they're doing things the way I would do it, he would be a pass-first point guard in this situation. Now, he too can be somebody who can go after his own shot. We saw him make multiple game-winning buckets last year, now near the trade deadline, which was a great sign for how he handles court situations. And I think that if you allow him opportunities, to put himself in the strongest position to facilitate, I think he can thrive in that circumstance too. I do think playing with Trae Young kind of held him back. Having to play the two-guard position kind of held him back. This is going to allow him to be more of an orchestrated point guard, for which I think ultimately he can really be for them. So they should be excited about what DeJounte Murray's assist total will look like from night to night, because they have so many options offensively that he should be able to get at least 9 assists every damn night if he really wants to. And Zion Williamson losing weight, hopefully that translates to him being healthy. I have no doubt that he's still going to be probably arguably the strongest player in basketball. Even as a guy who's lost weight, he has natural ability in that way that should be able to push people out the way even more so as he gets in better shape. Health is everything for Zion. We haven't really seen him kind of anchor that team like he was designed to, like he was paid to, more or less. But just the same, you want to see if he can step into that star that ultimately he was drafted to be, which I'm really not ruling out. If I'm being completely honest with you guys, I kind of still see him that way. But he's going to have to improve defensively at the top level, because he was drafted to be an elite defensive player when he came out of Duke, and that has not translated to what we've seen with the New Orleans Pelicans. So if his defense don't come back around, then that ultimately hampers the upside of what I think he can ultimately be. But if he recommits to the defensive end, he's a power player that proved himself on that Laker game last year in the in-season tournament, or rather the game before the in-season tournament where he got hurt. I think we lose that game if he is able to make it through the fourth quarter, which he ultimately got hurt in. But I think we lose that game. I don't think we can stop him. I think he proved that throughout the course of the third quarter, leading into that fourth quarter where he was still killing us before he got hurt. You just cannot underestimate a healthy Zion Williamson, especially when he has a legitimate point guard on the floor, making sure that all of his pieces are getting the ball around him. I just think the Pelicans are a real playoff team this year. I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the top 5. Wouldn't shock me at all. I think they're an easy bet to be a breakout team this year, so long as health permits and their coach commits to allowing all of what it is they have options to play. Hawkins needs to play, man. Trigger needs his minutes. You know what I'm saying? It's not a one-man offense. There's no reason for CJ McCollum to be getting no 20 shots up. No stupid shit like that. Excuse my language. But that's how frustrated. It's curse-worthy, frustrating for me to watch CJ McCollum play basketball for this team. I didn't feel that way when he played for the Portland Trail Blazers because the offense was set up more so for him and Dame to take turns and stuff like that. But in a team where they got nothing but offensive players everywhere, you don't need one guy who's not especially efficient taking so many shots, especially down the stretch of basketball games. They need to be less predictable and more unselfish as a unit. And it starts, in my opinion, with DeJounte Murray taking that ball and controlling that offense with the intention of getting the ball to the rest of those offensive players. If they play that way, they could the sky's really the limit. They could go as far as their talent takes them, and they got a lot of it. So yeah, man, that's pretty much where I'm at. There's still some teams I'd like to talk about. Memphis is another team that I think is going to immediately vault back into contention. They got so much talent as well. Zach Edey makes them different, in my opinion. Jaren Jackson's still in place if he's healthy. You know, they got so many players that got a lot of minutes last year because of the absence of other guys who are used to doing something. Unfortunately, G.G. Jackson's injury, it's going to take him out. I don't know how long, but that's a foot injury. I think he broke it, so he could be out for the first half of the season, maybe the entire season. That's extremely unfortunate for them. But the fullness of their roster could potentially be championship worthy, if you ask me. Could potentially be championship worthy, but it's going to require that they get that health back in order. And for Memphis, that's really been the issue as of late. So that's pretty much my video for today, man. I hope everybody's enjoying themselves. I really enjoyed making this particular one. Have a great season, everybody. BDL44. Thank y'all for watching. I'm out.